Pitter patter, let's get at her. Time for the Red, Gold, and Bold podcast as we break down quite a bit. What do we think back entering the summer on what the Kansas City Chiefs would be? We're going to take a look back at it. Is the Chiefs offense going to continue to be elite? Is Patrick Mahomes going to be an MVP quarterback? Is Travis Kelce underpaid? Is Orlando Brown going to actually play on the franchise tag? How will the Chiefs defense do sack-wise and without Mathieu? Is Eric Bieniemy done with the Chiefs after this year, the AFC West title? Could they possibly win a 7 straight? What about the AFC? We break it all down here on the Red, Gold, and Bold podcast.
You're listening to the Red, Gold, and Bold podcast, the most in-depth analysis of the Kansas City Chiefs on planet Earth, breaking down the Chiefs like no one else can. Red, Gold, and Bold is hosted by Jeff Chadiha, Eric Eager, and Soren Petro. Jeff Chadiha is a senior columnist and on-air personality for the NFL Network and NFL.com. Eric Eager is the vice president of research and development for Sumer Sports. Soren Petro is the afternoon drive host of the program on Sports Radio 810 WHB in Kansas City. The Red, Gold, and Bold podcast is proudly brought to you by Gann Asphalt and Concrete, Kansas City's nationally recognized full-service paving and pavement maintenance contractor, making parking lot problems disappear since 1994. Free consultations, no commissions, in-house crews, and every project comes with a written warranty. Find them online at GannAsphalt.com or call 816-484-3338. Gann Asphalt and Concrete. One contractor, all things parking lot. Gann Asphalt and Concrete is now hiring for all positions. Project manager, dump truck drivers, operators, and crew members. Starting pay up to $30 per hour based on experience. With paid time off and insurance, just to name a few of the benefits. Check out GannAsphalt.com for more info. Now, here are the hosts of the best Chiefs podcast, Jeff Chadiha, Eric Eager, and Soren Petro.
How about that updated open? Eric Eager asked for it. Curtis Siebold delivered it. It is the Red, Gold, and Bold podcast. Thank you for joining us. I don't know. We're headed into the offseason, so we're going to be rocking and rolling on probably Tuesdays. This week we're coming to you Wednesday because of my travel schedule. So thank you to Jeff Chadiha and Eric Eager for accommodating me. And, of course, thank you to our friends at Gann Asphalt and Concrete who really do appreciate supporting and sponsoring the best Chiefs podcast out there, and we thank you for being a part of it. We ask that you support our sponsors, Gann Asphalt and Concrete. As you heard, if you want to be a part of a great Kansas City company, they're hiring for all positions: project manager, dump truck driver, operators, and crew members. Starting pay up to $30 per hour, paid time off, insurance, all kinds of benefits for you. It's all at GannAsphalt.com. Find out more information at GannAsphalt.com. We are going to get after what it was we thought, gentlemen, the Kansas City Chiefs season was going to be if we were to look back to our June 7th podcast, which we reviewed. This is always a great exercise, and the purpose is not, listen, we're going to have fun, we're going to laugh about some things, we're going to brag about some things, we're going to act like some things didn't happen. I mean, that's just, at least what I'm going to do. But it's a learning experience. It takes us back to where we were going into the season and what the season ended up being. And let's start right with it, Jeff. Chiefs offense will continue to be elite without Tyreek Hill. I was buying, Eric was buying, you were selling. Why? Let's talk about the mindset where you were and then what you saw and how it ended up being different.
Well, I didn't see Mahomes trusting the offense the way he did. I think most of his offense in years past was about Travis, was about Tyreek. And so I couldn't foresee a world where losing a player that explosive would not be a huge detriment. Didn't have much faith in MBS. Didn't know anything about what Isaiah Pacheco would bring to the offense. I think he was a big part of this offense, he and Jerick McKinnon, of it being elite. We knew what Travis could do. I had a suspicion JuJu would be a good player for this, but it's those guys on the periphery and Patrick making that leap to being a guy who's going to trust those guys to make plays and being less explosive down the field. I was totally wrong. I was totally off. I mean, he had a great season, but I think those other guys that I mentioned were a huge part of this as well.
Yeah, for sure. Eric, what about it? You were buying that it was going to be elite. It ended up being that way. Anything shocked you on how it ended up coming to fruition?
Well, I was wrong about Pacheco. To Jeff's point, I was talking to you off air about the bets that I that I had preseason. I had some Edwards-Helaire overs just to kind of own some L's there as well. Like I figured the offensive line would run block well enough for any running back to do well. And I think I was, that part was right. But like Clyde being bad, we were looking, first 5 or 6 weeks, we're like, well, what's wrong with the offensive line? They were road grading last year and all this stuff. The passing game, it's weird, right? Because you look at, in the regular season, the Chiefs wide receivers in 2022 had averaged, I think it was something like 8 yards per target, which is a pretty good number. The season before it was 7 yards per target. And obviously with Tyreek Hill, like we were talking even before they traded Tyreek Hill, because the offense was clogged, right? You had Travis running. By the way, Kelce had 200 more yards in the regular season receiving in 22 than he did 21. Even though in theory there was supposed to be more attention to him, right? There was supposed to be more, Travis Kelce being covered. And what I believe it was, and again, we're not trying to apologize for the moves, but, I think the Super Bowl was, the Super Bowl and the AFC title game were emblematic of how it went. Like Valdez-Scantling was not a player that you can count on every week to be productive, but he was a player you could count on every week to run the safeties off and, open up that middle for Kelce. JuJu was not a player, I think mostly because of health, that you could count on every week. But when he was healthy, he navigated the middle of the field really well. And so the problem was with Hill was you were paying him so much money that he had to stop his routes short, because if he didn't, he was never going to get the ball against those too high looks. And so that clogged the middle for Kelce. That lowered the yards per target for the whole wide receiving core. And in some ways, I think of trading Tyreek Hill was like cutting a bush, right? Where like a couple of the branches were overgrowing the whole bush. And, even though you cut off the biggest branch, it allowed for sort of the rest of the organism to grow. And it's weird, but the quarterback, I think, to Jeff's point, and why I think that this is the biggest one, the quarterback understood what was happening, right? And he didn't force it. He didn't get frustrated. There were a couple of games, I think the Colts games and everything, where it looked bad, but ultimately he bought into the system and it ended up working.
Yeah, I would just add, I think Patrick Mahomes' growth was great. I think Andy Reid continued to evolve his offense and take care of things. I'm with you. I missed it on Isaiah Pacheco. Didn't see him turn the corner. I blew it on Clyde Edwards-Helaire. I had him my bold and daring prediction was that he'd be over 1,500 yards from scrimmage. And I think that's maybe the thing that was the eye-opener to me. It really doesn't matter. They turn and burn whoever it is, and they fit it in. And Andy Reid does a great job. I mean, if we needed to be reminded of it, apparently I did need to be reminded of it. It's that Andy Reid can make anything really work. He'll fit the scheme to whatever it is he's got. Patrick Mahomes, top 3 in MVP voting. Again, Jeff, you were selling. Similar theme, right? Like as to why. Just, hey, he lost his biggest weapon. The home run's gone. Expect it to be geared down, and maybe the defense will get some of the defensive stuff. Not going to rise up because it took a big step forward. It'd be tough to win an MVP if you end up being a mediocre team.
Yeah, and I think this was more just playing the odds. This was back in the days when Aaron Rodgers and Tom Brady were considered reliable options to win that award. So I'm thinking, who was I picking back then? Well, it was Brady and Rodgers. Brady won it. Rodgers won it last year, and Brady could have won it last year. You throw Josh Allen in the mix and Joe Burrow. There's got to be 3 guys in there who you would think would have a fair shot. And those 2 guys going south really, I mean, Mahomes would have won it anyway, but those 2 guys going south really blew this whole prediction out of the water for me. I mean, even Josh Allen couldn't keep pace with what Mahomes was doing.
Eric, I think it speaks to just this was the year where Patrick Mahomes just absolutely stabbed his flag in the ground and said, I'm the guy, right? We weren't there. None of us were there. Like we felt you and I were more confident than Jeff, but I'm like, this is it. He's the guy. That's what we saw this year.
Yeah, I think I bought that, right? Like he was 9-1, I think, when the season opened. I remember it was just a lot of primetime games early, right? You had LA, you had Tampa Bay. He was amazing against Tampa Bay a week after he was terrible against Indy. You had Buffalo and a 4:00 hour where he was pretty good. Like you had a bunch of games where he was on prime time. And then at the end of the year where they weren't on prime time, he had already kind of secured the MVP. So it was also, he obviously played well enough for it, but the narratives lined up for him as well. And that was, if you were going to bet him preseason, that was the reason, was they were going to be against the toughest schedule in the league in the first half of the year on prime time. And everybody got to see how good he was.
Yeah, I think anybody going to bet Patrick Mahomes to not be top 3 next year?
No.
I mean, he might not be.
People get bored with it. People get bored with quarterbacks winning multiple years in a row. But the way this team is constructed, it's going to be hard to see him not be in that top part again.
Yeah. In a lot of ways, he was helped by Tyreek Hill being gone and the way he had to play with those other guys. I think that's what put him over the top, was make those other guys better.
Yeah.
Well, and Tyreek being an 1,800-yard receiver for the Dolphins, like, if he would have gone to the Dolphins and sucked, I think people actually would have been less high on Mahomes. But since he went to the Dolphins and was a top 2 wide receiver in the league, you got to see every week what they gave up. And Mahomes is still great. Like, I think that actually helped Mahomes.
All right, this is one of my biggest bombs of the year. JuJu will be the top receiver. We meant by that wide receiver. We even defined it. Most catches, most targets. Jeff and Eric, you guys were buying. I was selling. I'd like to tell you that this was all about JuJu being hurt. And guess what? He just stayed kind of healthy. But it wasn't. He didn't stay healthy. And I was way too bullish on Marquez Valdes-Scantling. I think I was too bullish on Mecole Hardman. As I look back at it, this seems like just an absolute layup, right? Like, I don't know why I missed this because he had the biggest season. I have to believe, and I listened back to our conversation on these shows, and I'm like, I think I don't know. I wanted to believe in Marquez Valdes-Scantling so much that I was trying to will something over the top. And Eric, I know you're puzzled by this, but JuJu was the obvious choice. This was just trying to be too smart, I think, on my part.
Well, I'm a huge fan of MVS and what he does for the team. Like, I would say production-wise, I think you're right to look at what Reed said, which is look at the evidence. They gave Valdes-Scantling a bigger contract than JuJu. They gave him more years. They said, we know he's been a deep threat in Green Bay, but we're going to try to, utilize him in different settings. And they just didn't. And again, like, Valdes-Scantling when the ball in the air is a privilege, and he's a journey and all this stuff. But like, he did show in the AFC title game that if he had to play the number 1 receiver position, it wouldn't have been as lackluster production wise as it was. But I honestly think the thing that I missed too is those receivers all had a role to play, and his role to play was, to take coverage away from other players. And if the other team slept on him, then go, like the Niners did, then go over the top. But ultimately, like, he was never going to be, and it was pretty clear from the beginning, once the season started, that he was not going to be a 1,000-yard receiver.
JuJu shocked you.
Yeah, I mean, I think Andy probably played some mind tricks on people, trying to sell him as he hadn't been running the whole route tree. They haven't used him as well as he could be used in Green Bay. And that was a lot of the propaganda coming out of the Chiefs early on. But, yeah, I mean, for me, JuJu made sense just because when he had Antonio Brown with Pittsburgh, he was a really productive receiver. When Antonio Brown was gone, he wasn't the same receiver. So you knew Kelce was going to draw coverage. You knew that he was accomplished enough and physical enough. I had concerns about it as far as him staying healthy, but I also felt like, am I going to bet on MVS? Am I going to bet on Sky Moore or Mecole? Those guys either hadn't done enough or didn't have the skill set that JuJu was bringing to the table. So for me, it wasn't so much, I picked JuJu. It was like, for me, it was the lesser of 4 evils.
Travis Kelce is underpaid. The two of us that have some perspective were selling on that. That's Jeff and I. Eric, the ultimate Chiefs homer, was buying that. Yeah. Eric, how do you land on him still being? This is one where I think we're all three going to claim we nailed it. At least I'll take a shot at it. I don't know, maybe Jeff. I don't want to speak for Jeff, but he's paid really well. And he keeps restructuring the deal, getting more cash. To me, it's more about the nuances of the contract. He is the Tom Brady of the Chiefs in the sense that they're always reworking the deal, giving him cash now, making the cap number a little less. But overall, you're buying.
Did they not give Travis like $3 more million during training camp this year after this podcast aired? Like, didn't the Chiefs kind of like say
it was a maneuvering?
Eric, you're right. And
it was moving money. Yes, he got more money, but it came from later to now.
Okay, but I mean, look, there's another tight end in the NFL that makes more money than him per year. So by definition, he's underpaid.
I won't argue that.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with what Soren's saying here. I think he's doing things that are helping this team continue to play at a high level. And it's dangerous for a tight end at his age to be the highest paid player. Always trying to make sure he is at that level. I think that he's right where he needs to be.
Yeah, when he falls off, it's going to be rough for the Chiefs. Like,
yeah.
I mean, we'll see them figure it out. But like last year, it was hard for the Chiefs for a few, 2 months or so to figure out how teams were, adjusting to them. When Travis loses his fastball, it's not going to be easy.
I love this next one. All three of us selling. Orlando Brown will play on the franchise tag. All three of us.
Yeah.
No chance. Jeff, what did we miss on this one?
Well, we missed the fact that he likes having money coming. I think that's what we missed on it. He seemed to be so dug in at the time. Look, I don't know how you felt about it. I looked at it like no agent, high expectations, unrealistic sense of who he is. There was too many things playing into this to make it feel like he was going to play on this tag. And so I'm glad he did. It worked out well for him. It does set up for a whole new conversation this coming off season about what he's worth. But, down the stretch, he played well for them.
Eric?
Yeah, I mean, this was in June, and then July came up, and it was pretty clear, like, they were far apart. And so I think a lot of us changed our tune during that time. But when it came to June, like, we only had one instance where the Chiefs held their water on somebody, right? And that was Tyreek Hill. Like, we had not seen Brett Veach hold his water, more than once. And so this was a wait and see, I think, for all three of us. And I honestly think, if Orlando Brown had an agent worth the shit, like, he probably would have signed a real deal. But like, it was just not, and it was far apart for a long time.
Yeah, I think we missed it for sure. I'll disagree because Veach, like, we think back of John Dorsey ultimately ended up signing everybody, but Chris Jones they did get done. Tyreek Hill they didn't. They traded. We didn't really have much of a body of work to work
Mathieu
with.
Was another one to go against my point. Like, they let Tyrann Mathieu go. That was holding his water on a player who had been a very good player for them. So maybe maybe we were just wrong. Maybe.
Yeah, I like what Jeff said about, like, we underestimated how much he wanted money, right? Like, because I think the other thing that was shocking was he was in, like, it's like, okay, we started camp, he wasn't there. Like, all right, this is going to be a long one. Now it's like 3 or 4 days. And he was in, so he wasn't even taking fines at all. So yeah, I think I defer to Jeff. We underestimated how much he likes money. I think that was the big one in this. Chiefs defense will rank higher than 16th in sacks. Jeff was buying. I was buying. Eric was selling.
Oh, wow. Didn't believe. Eric's wearing that hater shirt today.
Jeff, I mean, you damn Chiefs apologist. I mean, you're just always just loving up. Listen, 16th is just middle of the pack. My theory on this one, we'll let Eric have the last laugh since he is being laughed at. My theory was, like, you can't suck that bad. Like, moving around in sacks is easier than people think. But keep this in mind for next year. It's easier to fall down that list. Well. So, I mean, I think I just played the numbers. I didn't think they were going to be number 2 in the NFL in sacks. Jeff?
No, I was in the same boat. I thought that, we think of sacks as being a defensive line-driven thing, but it's really a pressure thing. And so you knew if they had numbers that low again, then it was on Spagnuolo to have not dialed up his blitz packages. So I felt like, playing the numbers like you, that there was no way they could be. They were so bad. The bar was so low, it could only go up.
Eric? What the hell were you thinking?
I honestly, like, as a Chiefs fan, like, I have to rethink my relationship with Frank Clark's career, right? Like, I think Frank Clark is, like, ultimately a disappointment still, but I don't know. I can't be all that upset about him because they won 2 Super Bowls. You remember that Niners game where he had a safety against Trent Williams? Like, I felt like, and look, this defensive line, Kylan Saunders was a player this year. Michael Dana was a player this year. The thing I was probably most wrong about this offseason, and maybe the changes in the coaching staff, Joe Cullen, like the defensive line coach change was a big one. But remember what I said? They don't develop players. They develop players this year. Like, Michael Dana got better. Kylan Saunders got better. Frank Clark got better.
Karlaftis got better.
Yeah, and Karlaftis got better as the season progressed. So,
and Chris Jones had a monster year. By the way.
And Chris Jones had a monster year. And he had a year similar to the last time they were one of the league leaders in sacks in 2018. And like, and if he does that, like if you have a guy getting 15-ish sacks, like you're going to win a lot, with that metric.
And of course, all that leads us to the next one. The defense will be better without Tyrann Mathieu. Buying, this is where we all kind of settled into our roles. Buying Eric, buying me, selling Jeff. I think it's interesting. I'm not sure how Eric arrived where he arrived. I at least think my answers make sense. Jeff, you thought that they would improve sack-wise, but not improve defensively. What happened?
Well, the back end was a question for me. I mean, they had a lot of young guys playing. I feel like Mathieu at his best was somebody who could, obviously was a chess piece for Spagnuolo, a guy who could play in different roles for him. Yeah, he wasn't at his best the year before, but it still allowed them to mix up coverage and really negate some shaky cornerback play. And so you just didn't know what all these rookies were going to do. And so I give them credit. They were a lot better than I thought they would be, but I was also on record saying that I like the potential of this group, given the character, the talent. But yeah, I just didn't see it happening as quickly as it did.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I mean, you get if Joe Cullen doesn't get an offer to go somewhere, offensive line and defensive line coaches kind of typecast. It's kind of what they are. They end up having whole careers at that spot. They don't usually graduate up to OCs and DCs and that kind of thing. But Dave Merritt, I think kind of surprising, 5 rookies and the defense holds up the way it did in the D backfield, doesn't really get a sniff. I mean, I'm going to tell you, when he stands at a podium, he sounds like a head coach to me, sounds like a defensive coordinator to me. Didn't really get that opportunity. Maybe the Chiefs need to bow out early for him to interview more, but hell of a job by him. And I'll say this, they perform better in the back end. I'm with Jeff. I thought I was really just playing the math of I think they got to get better. And if they're walking away from him, they're doing it for a reason. I didn't think that they would be putting 3 rookies out there and handling the Cincinnati Bengals in the AFC Championship game the way they did. So they exceeded my wildest expectations. I'll take the W because I need them where I can get them. But I did not have them being as good as they are, right? As good as they were in that D backfield, Eric.
Yeah, well, I think the big thing and maybe why Merritt is not getting as much credit is this is a group, right? When we talk about weak link systems, the sort of research I was doing at PFF before, I assume it's all about the worst player in the secondary. And the worst player in the secondary was still better than the worst player in the last secondary, right? The loss of Daniel Sorensen meant more than the loss of Tyrann Mathieu in many ways. And I'll
to the betterment.
Yeah, of course. I'll one up everybody here. They traded Rashad Fenton at the deadline.
Yeah,
they were so sold on their defensive backfield, and mind you, it was even better than we thought because McDuffie missed the first month and a half of the league year. They were playing 2 not first round corners, a 4th and a 7th rounder for a long time, and that really, they were able to be buoyed there, and I think that speaks a lot. And one of the things I heard internally from somebody I talked to with the team was like, it wasn't, even the front office drafting all those guys. It was Coach Reed and everybody playing them and saying, basically saying you belong here, right? Joshua Williams starts the year behind a 7th rounder as a 4th rounder, plays, gets abused against Buffalo, sits the bench, plays a little bit down the stretch, then plays in a big game against Cincinnati. Like I said a number of times, this is different than when Charvarius Ward played the playoffs in 2018 after sitting the whole season. Like they played those guys, and that really came to fruition down the stretch.
All right, there's one that we absolutely nailed, and I think we're all very confident about, and that's the fact that this would be the final year for Eric Bieniemy with the Kansas City Chiefs, with his hiring by the Washington Commanders as their offensive coordinator, despite the massive objections of one LaShawn McCoy. It was indeed the final season for Eric Bieniemy with the Chiefs. Jeff, why did we end up getting this one right?
Well, I think we all read the tea leaves, right? We all knew that the way this was playing out at this point in the offseason last year and the uncertainty and the 1-year deal, that it just felt like it was time for him to move on, whether that was going to be a head coaching gig someplace or there was going to be a lateral move like he just made with Washington. And I've known the guy for a long time. I think I have a ton of respect for him. I'm happy that he went out with a happy ending here. So I think there was a lot of people who were trying to say he was the issue, he was the problem. even Mahomes gave him a shout out at his press conference when he won the MVP, saying, look, he was the one who really preached the importance of situational football at the end of games and guys getting down and staying in bounds. Jarrett McKinnon play. Tyreek Hill gave him some flowers, on social media. So, I hope that this leads to him getting his opportunity. But yeah, I think we all looked at it like this is, what else can you do here? You're not going to get credit for calling the plays, not getting credit for Patrick Mahomes. You got to rebrand yourself somewhere else.
Eric, I think if we got this one wrong, we'd all be sitting here going, "What is your plan, Eric? I know you're going. How long till you read the tea leaves?" This was just kind of almost a process of elimination, was it not?
Yeah, he missed. He didn't miss, but the league missed his first chance, which was when the Chiefs went from being good to amazing, right? And they stay amazing forever. No change in that status means no change in his status. That's the hard part. He goes to Washington, they're below average. If he can get them to good, that's a change in status, and that'll be a change in his status, hopefully, for his career. So I think that obviously a smart move to go somewhere and reset expectations and exceed those expectations.
By the way, he succeeds or doesn't succeed in Washington, Jeff?
I think it succeeds there. I don't think it's going to be like a top 5 offense that he's running, but whoever's playing quarterback there, I think he needs to show his leadership skills. I think he needs to show his ability to communicate and have when he has a forum like that, a platform where he can show off who he is as a person. That's what's going to get him a job. To me, he's the black Dan Campbell. He's just all about intensity, leadership, motivation, and he can show that in Washington now.
By the way, I think that it's back to like the Tony Dungy thing where it's like Tony Dungy said, like, I want there to be a black coach that I don't like, right? Like there are certain coach types, and like there are certain coach types that have not been accessible to African Americans yet, right? Like that kind of, we have to be comfortable, I think, being like, look, like that has to be okay, right? Like that has to be an okay, prototype for a guy like Bieniemy to be able to, go into.
I'll say this: I love the location. The offense wasn't very good. There's no reason to say this thing is going to be great. So any positive movement by him, we'll see what they do in free agency and what they do in the draft. Obviously, a long way to go.
They got 3 great wide receivers.
But no quarterback, right?
Yeah.
And we don't know what he's either going to assimilate a new free agent or he's going to develop a 5th round pick if he has success. What I love is there's no way to deny any success being the credit of Eric Bieniemy. So everything that you would want to say it was all Andy Reid, it was all Patrick Mahomes, that's all gone. I think this is a great opportunity for him, and I hope he knocks it out of the ballpark for it. Chiefs will win their 7th straight AFC West title. Eric and I were buying, consummate homers that we are. Jeff, you were selling. Listen, I think there was good reason to sell on this with all the hype. When we get to people who listen to our 2D podcast, hear some of the predictions, they'll hear some familiar AFC West names that were possibilities to win this division. But what'd you miss on why the Chiefs, ended up getting it done?
I missed everyone else in the AFC West just falling apart. I mean, I was so hopeful of, all these teams, all these offseason moves, and it's the Chargers obviously did not do what they were supposed to do. I think injuries were a big part of that for them, but the Raiders did not rise. The Broncos obviously never got going. And so I thought there would be more tough games. I think I picked them to go 3-3 in the AFC West, which was laughable now. But I couldn't have seen the level of incompetence and ineptitude and inconsistency and injuries that would haunt all the other teams in the AFC West.
Eric, were you like me when Nathaniel Hackett did what he did in the opening game? Did you not just go, it's over? I mean,
if you go back and listen to the 2 Deep that we did, I even said, though, I was like, look, you guys all talk about how easy a schedule the Chargers have. They have a Jaguars game, a Seattle game, and there was like 3 other terrible teams. I'm like, they go 3-2 in that mark. And we're all thinking they go 5-0. And of course, they get beat to sleep by Seattle. They get beat to sleep by the Jags in the regular season. And it's just classic Seattle stuff. And like the Broncos one, I'll say this: the Broncos.
Classic Chargers stuff. You mean? You said Seattle.
Well, the Chargers thing was predictable. Like I hope we've evolved as a species by next fall to not pick the Chargers. Like,
Hey, but you know what though? 6 games against AFC West teams, 5 of those games decided by 3 points or less. That's
yeah,
crazy to me.
right.
That's
And
crazy.
the Raiders are interesting because I was down on the Raiders, but if you flip the coin on the Raiders, like first 6 or 7 games, they're a contender, right? They actually were better than, of course, in their record, and then they quit on their coach at the end of the season. But then the Broncos were the team I did not see them being bad, and they were bad. The Chargers aren't bad; they're just not as good as the Chiefs, per usual. But the Raiders were like a good team that got snake bitten. They kind of got the other side of the coin from last year's lucky season. And the Broncos were like the one team that was legitimately awful that I did not expect to be legitimately awful.
Yeah, and I think Jeff makes a great point about the close games. Although I do think good football teams find a way to win close games. But, Eric, you've given the numbers. Like, the key to being a great team is blowing people out. Close games tend to be 50-50. The Chiefs are kind of bucking that trend, and maybe that's something that we'll have to.
All the Chiefs' losses come in close games. Like, the thing is the Chiefs play about 40% of their games are blowouts. And then the other 60 are close. And like, those are the only games they lose. They never lose blowouts, right? So like, it still is the thing that we ignore about the Chiefs is, we have the heart attack game against Denver on New Year's Day, but you also have the game against the Raiders. That's never a contest. And they have a lot of those, and they never lose those games. They lose the close, like they lost by a combined 10 points this year in the 4 games, right? Or 3 games they lost. So it's still kind of the same thing. It's just that the Chiefs never get blown out.
Final one, Chiefs will win the AFC. I want all of our fans that are fans of both of our podcasts, Red, Gold, and Bold here tonight, and Too Deep, to listen to what we're going to say now. Because when we get to our Too Deep podcast, something changed over the course of 3 months with one of us. All 3 of us were selling this. Chiefs will not win the AFC. We'll hear in our 2D podcast, a lot of us were picking the Bills, Jeff and I. That's where I was in June. The Bills were the team to beat. I thought they'd be there. Jeff, I assume that's what drove this. Not that you thought the Chiefs would be terrible. You didn't. No. You had them in the playoffs, but you thought that there were other teams, the Bills in particular, that had surpassed them.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I always chuckle about this because people think that nobody was picking the Chiefs.
Right.
I don't think anybody was surprised the Chiefs won a championship because of who they have playing quarterback and coaching the team. But I think the vibe around the Bills was so strong, and the recency bias with the way the Rams won the previous year with being so loaded, it was just the Bills started off looking like a team that was not going to be stopped. And so it's somewhere along the way, the injuries kicked in. Von Miller, we'll never know what that team would look like at the end of the season if Von Miller had stayed healthy. But that was a huge, huge blow to that defense, obviously, and obviously the elbow injury that Josh Allen had and the deficiencies that Ken Dorsey had as far as running the offense. There were too many things that worked against them, but that's why I picked them.
Well, and the DeMar Hamlin thing was probably emotionally draining.
Exactly. That too.
But Eric, just to be clear, as we got later in the summer, you ended up picking the Chiefs to win the AFC. Where were you? Where were you then? 3 months previous to when we made the pick going into the season, and what changed for you?
Well, all of these buy or sell are 50-50 to me, right? So if you say the Chiefs are winning the AFC and you offer me 50-50 odds, I'm going to take the other side. I'm a better, right? But if you tell me which 2 teams are going to the Super Bowl, like there are no 2 teams that are better than 50%. So that was when I picked the Chiefs. So that's the distinction. I did like Buffalo. I did think Buffalo was the best team in the NFL for the majority of the offseason. And they were really good all year until kind of the end. They kind of petered out at the end. But you remember they kicked the crap out of the Rams in the first game. They had the weird game against Miami, but for the most part, they beat the Chiefs. They covered the spread on the road against the Chiefs. Like, imagine betting Mahomes as a home underdog and you losing the bet, right? Like that's how good they were. But the thing for me was, if you tell me buy or sell on any team to make the Super Bowl, I'm going to sell because it's a 32-team league and a 16-team conference. So that's kind of where my mind was in June. I also got more as I was watching preseason and sort of talking to people on the Chiefs and the fact that they were healthy, right? And like there was no like glaring problems with the team, and the Orlando Brown came back and all this kind of stuff. Like that's kind of where I gravitated more to the Chiefs. But like in June, I thought the Bills, like I respected the market and thought the Bills were the best team.
Yeah, I thought the Bills were the best. I think the one thing we take away that's changed now, Patrick Mahomes has been very expensive and won the Super Bowl. He'll be even more expensive this year. We'll see if our opinions change this next time around. All right, that's going to do it for us here on the Red Gold and Bold. For Jeff Chadiha from the NFL Network, Eric Eager from Sumer Sports, my name is Soren Petro from Sports Radio 810 WHB. We will see you next time on Red Gold and Bold.